So welcome once again to this third session or third part of the 2Tokens Summit session. My name is Olivier Rikken and I'll be hosting this part because as part of the research team of 2Tokens I was heavily involved in creating the roadmap in itself, and we're going to deep dive into the journey, how we came to the roadmap, and we're going to deep dive a little bit into the roadmap in itself. I'm not going to do that by my own. I already said it. I have my colleague over here, Mark van Rijmenam. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Olivier.
And as we are going to talk about how we came to the roadmap, how it was established, and also what the roadmap looks like, we're going to dive first into the journey in itself and then the roadmap. But before we do so, we have a small poll, and that is actually the next one. What do you think are the benefits of token financing? So are that A, democratization of value creation, opening of new markets, fractionalization of assets, easy to comply with regulations, or all of the above? So very curious what you think about this one. So what are the benefits of token financing? Democratization of value creation, opening of new markets, fractionalization of assets, easy to comply with regulations, or all of the above? Votes are coming in, and I do want to urge you while you vote also, it is a live webinar, so you do have the possibility to really ask questions towards me or Mark, and we'll try to answer it as good or bad as we can during this session.
We'll do our best.
If we don't have the time right now, we'll do our utmost best to answer the questions afterwards. But we do like the interaction, so please ask the questions if you want to. Well, again, for the interest of time, I'll stop the voting and I'll show the results with you. E, all of the above. So people see all these elements as the benefits of token financing. Do you concur with that? Or?
Yes, of course, I absolutely agree with that, because it's sort of also the reason why we put this question in, to sort of show you, the various benefits of tokenization. And it offers you, indeed, democratization of value creation. You can open new markets. You can find investment across the globe much easier. You can fractionalize your assets. You can fractionalize your building or whatever asset you have. So and with that, tokens are programmable, so it's very easy to comply with regulation. So yes, all of the above was the right answer.
Yeah, so we all do see many opportunities.
Absolutely, yes.
So let's dive into how we got to the roadmap. And can you tell me a bit about the background? How did it all start? Where did we come from?
Sure. So it was already a little bit explained by Alex at the start of this show, but the idea of 2Tokens is to create an ecosystem of organizations, from commercial organizations, regulators, to help us understand and figure out how we can use tokenization within our society. And we wanted as 2Tokens to clarify the path to tokenization. So what we've tried to do in the past year was to build, this purpose-driven framework to classify tokens, and to also understand when you are building a token, what are the things that you have to think of, and we're going to go through that in a little bit. As you will see, as Olivier will probably mention many times, is that the framework is still in draft, and it's really for knowledge purposes for you to help and understand of how a token works.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does this journey start? So where did we start actually with the project? Yeah,
so the journey started almost exactly a year ago. So we started in November 6th. We had the first roundtable, and during this roundtable, we looked at the path to tokenization. So what are the areas that we need to think of when we want to clarify this path to tokenization? And there are several areas that we looked into that came bubbled up to the top of things that we should look into. The one is the international position. It has already been mentioned. We were working together with partners to make this sort of a global approach to tokenization. The second one is when you start raising investments. We saw, of course, in 2017 and 18 the ICO surge with, as was mentioned before, a lot of scams that came out of that. Fortunately, that era is over, and now we can really look into how can we use tokenization to create value and to raise investment for creating that value. And then the third aspect that we noticed that was mentioned by all the attendees. We have to look at the governance of tokenization. How can we work with the different organizations in the world, the ITSA or the Interwork Alliance, and how can we guide the regulators as well and help them understand of how can we use tokenization in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually did a series of 3 roundtables. So this was the first one you just described. The second one, what was the main focus?
Yeah. So once we had sort of clarified the path to tokenization, we thought the idea would be good to what is necessary to sort of create this purpose-driven tokenization. How can we create a token or a token economy that really benefits organizations and benefits the citizens as well as the governments? So one thing that we noticed there that people really were struggling to find is shared understanding. We had this question at the beginning of the show: what is a token? Everyone thinks something else when thinking about a token, we have utility tokens, we have security tokens, we have currency tokens. So it's very important that we have a shared understanding and that we start to see how we can use that for innovative funding. But then again, if we have this shared understanding, we also need to start to educating people, and that's what we did with the 2Token that we created earlier this year, where we want to help and guide people to understand how to use an actual token, and we shared this knowledge, and we'll continue to do so through the masterclass that we'll mention in a bit as well. So,
and then the third roundtable.
Yes, yeah. The third roundtable was in February this year, just before COVID started, basically. So we still had a chance to be together with over 100 people, I think we were. Again, a fascinating roundtable that we had, because we were looking into token finance. How can you use, what are the frameworks, what are the legal frameworks if you want to finance your business using tokenizations, or if you want to use tokens in your organization? And do we have to create completely new laws, or can we sort of use the laws that we have and slightly adapt that? And one thing that was clearly mentioned is that and it has already been mentioned today before, is we need these global token standards. Tokens are not just a Dutch thing, not a European thing. Tokens are global, so we have to have global standards with that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've got a question from GMA. GMA, thank you very much for that one. Suppose the standard becomes soon available. What is a practical time frame to make it work, allowing financial and other applications to use it within Europe? Good question, because we created this one for the Netherlands, clearly. That was our main focus to start with.
Well, that's a very good question, and thank you for that. That's, of course, depends on so many different factors of how we work with at the European level. I'm really glad already that we have, we're working together with the different partners within Europe to make this happen. But to give a time scale of when this will happen, I think that's very challenging to give at the moment.
Yeah. All right, so back to the roundtables. The third one about token financing.
Yeah.
So you already said it was about global token standards, but also on impact on society, these kind of elements that we discussed, right?
Yeah, I think what really came out of these roundtables was that the impact that tokens will have on our society will be huge. If we have fractional ownership using tokens, if you have a large building that you just can sell using tokens on the secondary market, just like that, that really changes the economy. If you all of a sudden trillions of euros become available and become liquid. So the impact of society will be huge, and I think it's great that organizations such as 2Tokens, but also the organization that we work with, we learn to understand how we use tokens for the benefit of our society.
Yeah. So we first had these round of 3 roundtables. What did we do afterwards? Because then we took the next step. Because this was the first input for the roadmap, and then we were fine-tuning it actually for the first time.
Yes, so we took all the lessons that we had from these 200-300 people that helped us. So we are very grateful of all the input that we got from the various organizations, because in the end, 2Tokens thrives with the organizations that we work for, and that we do this together. And so we started we're working on 3 use cases, because the objective of 2Tokens is to do experiments. We are a foundation, so we can sort of play around, I would almost say, with tokens to see how it works and how we can benefit from it. So we started first with the 2Token. So the 2Token was willing to help organizations to how to deal with tokens, and the objective actually was to use it to give people access to the summit with the token. Unfortunately, COVID sort of changed that plan a little bit, which is a shame. But now we are trying to see how we can use it for partner organizations that want to help and create a better understanding of tokenization in the Netherlands. So we're moving that one to still an educational perspective, but helping organizations. And the other two use cases that we worked on was the electronic bill of lading, which is about the trade trust token, and NGC, which is a token to enable vertical funding. I'm not going to do it in depth now because we'll have a great session after this that going into depth is, and I don't, of course, want to send in their foot.
And it doesn't end there because we want to find new use cases to test our roadmap to see how we have to tweak it, fine-tune it, and even further develop it, right? Yeah,
so that's what we're trying to do is in the next year, starting of course with 2021, is that we want to do 2 or 3 use cases per year. And we want to do that with the partner organizations so that we can help them and the community learn about how tokens work and how we can use tokens within our society. And of course, the more the technology develops, the more advanced these use cases will become. And in the end, what we also will do is we'll share this knowledge back to the community, back to the partner organizations who have been helping us. And we do that through online masterclasses. Well, especially in COVID time, we've done so many masterclasses, and thanks for all the guests that helped us with that. With these masterclasses, we can share our knowledge that we've gained using these use cases. And I think that's very helpful for organizations to benefit from them so that they can learn how they can implement tokens within their own business.
All right. So thank you for explaining the journey that we went through and how we actually came to this version of the roadmap, which isn't actually the first version. We had multiple versions before that, but I'll elaborate on that in a second. Before we're going to dive into the roadmap in itself, time for another poll question for you. And also, again, if you have questions to us, please type them in because we'll try to handle them immediately over here. So the next poll question is, what regulators can be involved when you issue a token? Is that A, the AFM, the Authority for Financial Markets, D, the Dutch National Bank, C, AFM and DNB together, or D, a multitude of regulators? So what regulators can be involved when you issue a token? So please start voting right now by really clicking on the answer, and we can see it shifting over here. I see a lot of answers coming in already. So keep them coming, because this was really one of the things we ran into the first time, because we were very much focused on the financial regulation side in the beginning. And after a few months down the road, we were like, but there are many more regulators involved in this one. Kind of giving the answer already here. But that was one of the things we saw immediately.
And I think that was a great lesson that, is exactly as you say, it's a lot more than just finance. There are a lot of things, a lot of areas within the society that come at play when you talk about tokenization. And I think that is one of the great lessons that we had here.
All right, I'll stop the poll right now and I'll display the results for you at home as well. Fortunately, the majority says a multitude of regulators.
That's good to hear.
That is really good to hear. Thank you very, very much for that one. But still, if you either AFM, either DNB, or AFM and DNB together. So still, people think it is mainly the financial regulators that need to be involved, but it turns out that it can be many more. So I'll hide the results and I'll walk you through the roadmap that we actually created. So like I told before, the roadmap in itself was a journey, and over the past year we had 3 versions. And first we had a very simplified version. We thought, well, if it goes like that, this is the decision to be made, and that's quite easy. And a few months down the road, we and especially after the first roundtables, or after the roundtables in itself, we actually found out that it was much more complicated and there were many more choices. And that's basically what you see in the middle right there of your screen.
If they can read all the different...
No, you can't read it, but it's just for the general idea in this case. And then on the bottom left-hand side, you see where we are right now, and you see that we actually have a lot more complexity every single time we dive into a new use case, or when new regulations come around, or we actually find another exemption that we can make use of, or where you can potentially make use of. And this brings me to actually a few important elements. Well, you mentioned it already. It's well, it's basically a continuous draft. It will never be finished. And it's really made to create awareness when you have a token project, that you really in an early stage when building the token can figure out what could be the regulators that I have to report to, or the rules and regulations that I have to adhere to. Again, in a really early stage of your project, so you don't get caught by surprise when you completely built the token in itself, started selling it or whatever the use of the token was, and then find out, oh, I should adhere to these rules and regulations, and then you have to go back through the drawing table. So it's really to guide you through the process of what are the rules and regulations you have to consider when you issue your token. It is also not a free pass that when you went through this to this roadmap, then that is the truth. It is a guideline, but it is in no way, shape or form legal advice. And also the regulators will always have the final say about it. But it's really to create awareness. What do I have to think about? So you can integrate all these process steps that you might have to take in an early stage of your project, making it easier to implement your token in itself. And what we mentioned before already, right now it is for Dutch law. And the Dutch law and all the regulators around that is difficult enough already. It took us a year to get to this phase, let alone that if we want to take into account all the regulators, for example, within the EU. So really see it as a first step, and we see it as a challenge to keep on evolving this roadmap over the next few years for new exemptions or new rules and regulations. MiCA is probably going to have a huge effect on the roadmap in itself. So this is really what we want to do with the 2Token Foundation as well. So you don't have to go through this decision tree by hand yourself, obviously. That would be a bit too complicated, I would say. So we created an interactive website for the token roadmap in itself. And there you can actually, if you go to this roadmap, you can click on two buttons, either classify your token or start the roadmap. And this is really important because before you start the roadmap, we urge you to really classify the token, because based on the classification of your token, you can really go through the roadmap in an easier manner. Otherwise, you didn't answer all the questions with regards to the characteristics and the purpose of the token for yourself. And one of the frameworks you can use is obviously the ITSA framework that was mentioned earlier on. It is obviously not the only one, but it is a very good one. But do bear in mind, it gives you an idea of the economic perspective of the token and not so much the legal perspective per se of the token. Another thing that you could do is take, for example, the Howey test. That is something you could do as well. But again, we also link to the ITSA framework, and there you can really figure out what is the purpose of the token, the characteristics of my token, and all these elements are things that you have to really thought through carefully before you start the roadmap, and also really think this through at the beginning of your whole project. Otherwise, you're going to have a very vague story towards your legal advisor or other advisors and to the regulators in itself. So once you have classified the token, you can go through the to the roadmap. And the first question, obviously, is did you classify the token? And I'm not going to go over all the questions in detail, but an important one, obviously, is what is the classification of your token? Is it a security token, or do you suspect it is a security token or a utility token or a payment instrument? Another question can be, do you work with others, their tokens? Because that can have real implications that you might have to register with the DNB and other steps you have to take. Another question can be, for example, is the token prepaid and or transferable to others? Because that can have a huge effect if you would either fall under Dutch regulation, under the Dutch Financial Supervisory Act. And based on these questions, and these were just 3 examples, but there are many more questions in the beginning, you will either come to the advice that you are likely to be regulated under the Dutch Financial Supervision Act. And given the questions that you went through, you can go to your legal advisor and say, hey, we already thought about all these things, so can you help us how we should deal with the regulators in this regard? The other thing is we can never say you won't be regulated, because in the end it is to the regulators if you're going to be regulated, yes or no. So it could be that if you went through the roadmap that we say, well, there might be ground for an exemption, or it could well be possible that you won't need to be regulated under the Dutch Financial Supervisory Act. But again, if you come to this result, double check this with your legal advisor in order to do so, but it helps you also in your discussion with them and in the end also in discussions with some of the regulators there. But again, like we emphasized on, it's not only the financial regulation, so it doesn't stop here, because once you came through these points, we still have a series of other questions that you have to answer, and we made it as easy as possible by yes, no, or go back to the previous question. And by answering these questions, and for example, it can be a question like, can you win money with this token? And not from a capital gain point of view, but like a kind of lottery sense. Well, we have many more questions there, and then actually you can end up with, in our case, 4 other regulators or governmental bodies, and also in the end we do emphasize on the fact that you still can and might need to check other regulators as well. And one of them, for example, can be, well, if your token is internationally focused, again, this is for Dutch law, and maybe because your token is internationally focused, you have to get in contact with regulators from other countries or regulatory requirements from other countries in itself. It also can very well be because one of the things that's not, for example, in this roadmap is the sector specific other than the financial regulatory bodies. But for example, if you would create a token for the telecom sector in itself has a regulator as well. So these would be regulatory requirements you might want to double check before you actually bring out this token in itself. But again, this roadmap is really there to raise awareness in a very early stage, and also to make you realize that in a lot of cases the token in itself is not something really new in the eyes of the law. And that means that going through the regular regulatory processes is the way to go for your token. And at the beginning we thought it would be difficult to get your token regulated if needed, but it turns out that in a lot of cases it is quite straightforward, and the process of getting regulated or adhering to the right regulatory regimes isn't that difficult in the end. It is work, it is effort you have to do, but in a lot of cases it's not something new. It might be something new in a few cases, and that's basically where we build our 2Tokens or the use case around, because as we are entering a new world, it can very well be that somebody comes up with a token that doesn't fall within a certain route already and maybe fall between the cracks. And this is really what we want to investigate as well. So we want to update this roadmap on a continuous basis based on changing rules and regulations. So it's always an ever-changing process in itself, or an ever-changing roadmap in itself, but also based on new use cases where we might come up with new exemptions. And also in this version, we build in a few exemptions, not all of them, obviously, because there are way too many to build in such a short notice. And we'll be updating them on these known exemptions as well, so making it continuously more valuable for you to use it. In the meantime, while I was talking a lot, I've got a question, and a question from Roland. Roland, thank you very much. There's resistance from the banking industry to allow the purchase of tokens with common payment methods. Do you expect clear guidelines on this from regulators such as DNB or AFM? What is your...
Well, I think you already can purchase tokens. You can go to Coinbase and use Ideal to pay to buy whatever tokens they offer. So you can already do that, and as long as you comply with the existing regulations, I think a lot is already possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can buy a lot of the tokens already. What could be a hurdle up till now is to open a bank account if you are a token project. Yeah. But having said that, It's not impossible. There are examples where it is possible, but you really have to, and this where it can help as well, really explain the purpose of the token. How did you build in the governance? Is it safe? Can you comply to any anti-money laundering laws? These kind of things, because this is the certainty that the banks and the regulators want to have when you work with tokens.
I think that's what the case is about also this roadmap. It's really to help companies and startups who want to do something with tokens to understand what are the things they need to be aware of. And if they do that, and if they look at all these regulations and know which regulations they have to comply with, and if you then provide the documentation for that, I think getting a bank account is doable here as well.
Yeah, I get another question from GMA. GMA, thank you very much. I hope I will interpret this question correctly, but is it a layered approach on the token roadmap in itself? Well, just my interpretation of your question in this regards, the layered approach is first we're going to talk about the characteristics of the token, high level, then more on the technical side. Are you a creator of the token, or are you creating a platform, or these kind of questions? And the third one is, what is the behavior of the token, and can you use it for example, paying it outside your use case or not? These are all elements that are built into. So we're peeling it off. So if that is what you mean by a layered approach, yes, it is. And otherwise, please send us an email and we'll try to discuss it outside of this broadcast of today. Like I said, it's the first public version. We're going to update it all the time, and it's a guidance version. So it's not legal advice, but it helps you in the discussions with your advisors, with your lawyers, and in the end with the regulators as well, that you really thought it through a lot, what your token is about, and that you really took regulation into account with designing the tokens in itself. And yeah, like I said, the next steps are continuous update on either new rules and regulations or either findings of new use cases that we're going to investigate over the next few years. That brings me to the end of the third part of this 2Tokens Summit. And to end this part, we're going to end with another poll question. And in the meanwhile, we'll go out of the studio once again. And we have two new speakers coming up, whom will introduce themselves in a second. So thank you very much. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to send them in, and we'll try to answer them after this summit, so probably in the next week or so. And thank you very much. And the next poll is, do you think this interactive roadmap will help you in your decisions? A, yes, definitely. Yes, I'm interested to learn more. C, it's complex, but I'm excited to see more. Or no, I foresee a lot of hiccups due to the constantly changing landscape. I see the first few results. That gives me a positive feeling in this case, but I'll leave the result to the rest. Yeah.
Keep on voting, keep on voting. We're back here. Hi. This was a great session, and it got me to get me another drink. I hope you, I think behind the scenes also got an extra drink for you. We're gonna show the polls, the results of the polls, and then I'm going to introduce you to the next speaker. Do you think this interactive roadmap will help you in your decision? And I am glad to say that most people said yes, definitely. So 36%, that's great. So thank you so much for explaining, Oliver, Mark.